Hello, everyone. Welcome to the program. My name is William Hemsworth. Great to be with you all again today for today's show. Really excited to have my guest. He's the author of a great book called The Love Driven Man. So, author and speaker Marek Rudak. He is my guest
Ah,
today. Did I roll the R's right, Mark?
yes,
All
yes.
right.
I really appreciate the. No, it's funny because you got the R so right that you kind of fell off with the easier part, but I really appreciate you stepping up and trying it. It's yeah, because it's definitely counterintuitive for English speakers.
All right. Yeah. So, yeah, I wanted to try to do it right because my last name is Hemsworth, and before the Hemsworth twins became famous, my name
Yeah.
got butchered all the time.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so
So now they tell you now they call you the son of Thor.
well, that and no joke, I get at least one email a day asking if I know Chris or Liam. I'm like, no,
Oh,
no, I don't.
oh.
So, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure, sure. Yeah. So that's always kind of a dangerous question because, I can talk for hours, but just kind of like in a nutshell, long story short, I was born in Poland. That's where the accent comes from and the name filled with rolling R's. So I was born in Poland. And what happened is when I was 10, my dad passed away. And when I was 13, my mom remarried. She moved to the United States. When I was 14, I joined her. I went to moved to California. I went to a very nice Catholic high school, St. Joseph Notre Dame. At the time, I'm very sad to say that to me, religion was just like, hey, something that you do, something that your adults tell you, and something that is a bit of a tax, if you will, if you want to get good education in a private school. So even though intellectually I understood that the teachings, and when it comes to heart, my heart was set on the things of the world, and so I really focus on accomplishments. One thing that really set me on that path is obviously an abusive grandfather who like really destroyed my confidence. Another thing that really continued me on that path was when I moved to the United States. My stepdad was okay with me, but I felt like a fifth wheel in my family, and I felt that, hey, my siblings have the perfect family. I'm kind of like the odd man out. So what I need to do is I need to take care of myself. And I always done pretty well in school, so I focused on academics, focusing on getting the best record possible to get a good college, so I can get a great job and prove to the world that I'm worth it. And to me, I thought that was the primary way of getting people to notice me is through accomplishments and ultimately to the paycheck, and that's how the world will get to know me. So that's what drove me to West Point. Obviously, I would have done the same thing all over again if I could. But at the time, to be completely honest, I was more about accomplishments. I thought, hey, if I graduate from West Point with all these badges and things on my uniform, I'll just be like those confident guys you see in the movies.
Right.
I'd be like those kind of the superheroes you see in those Avenger movies. And I did very well over there. I graduated top 10% of my class. I ended up going to infantry. And again, the main reason I went to, because my major at West Point was computer science. So to me, the logical thing would be signal corps, which is like, IT communications.
Mhm.
But I thought it's like, hey, I need to continue to prove my worth. So I went to infantry. I went to ranger school. Again, great experiences. I would have done the same thing all over again. But where things started to crack down for me was with my marriage. And at first, I it's really like looking back, it's what were you thinking, jackass? It's kind of funny. You were in the army too. You
Right.
kind of see how these privates get these justice of the peace weddings before deployments or or
Right.
overnight, and you always make fun of them. But hey, I'm an officer, I know better. But I did something very similar, and essentially what happened was is my mom passed away from cancer. It was hard, and after she passed away, I was very lonely, and also I was facing a deployment to Afghanistan, and I met this woman when I was on my leave from Iraq, and I she really made me feel special, and to me, I felt like, hey, this is the right time, this is the right thing, and let's do it, and and so I proposed and got married, and I just really didn't understand what I was signing up for. But at the time, I kept going. I my service commitment finished, and I started looking for a job. Long story short, I ended up getting a job with ExxonMobil, great paying job, but great paying career. But that's like when things with my marriage started to break down, because for much of my marriage, I was away. For example, I was in Afghanistan for 50 months, but now, like once you're back and you live with that person, cracks start to really come out,
Mhm.
cracks start to get bigger. And at the time, I'll be honest with you, I was very good about courage on the battlefield, if you will, But when it comes to courage in marriage, oh man, I was a coward. And to me, what I did
It's
is
hard.
something that to me felt logical, which was to run away from my problems. And the way I did that is when I went to ExxonMobil, I asked for a overseas assignment because I felt like, hey, I actually, ironically enough, felt a lot more peace working offshore in Nigeria than being at home. Because at home I had to face the things about my marriage that I didn't like, and I thought that, hey, if I do enough of these trips, eventually things will work out, and down the road, my then wife will thank me for it. And unfortunately, that was the final coffin. I mean, the final nail in the coffin, in a sense that that even grew us more apart. And the thing that really almost killed me and really destroyed my life as I knew it was the fact that my ex-wife cheated on me. Again, I knew we had issues, but I just did not expect it, and it was super painful. But that's exactly what I needed to start my walk back to Christ. And all these things that I knew from grammar school in Poland or Catholic high school, all of a sudden started making sense. And it definitely was an overnight conversion. Took about 7 years, but when that thing happened, when that drastic thing happened, it just made me realize just how false sense of security I had my whole life, and it really set me up for my walk back to Christ. And and again, it wasn't an overnight conversion, but by learning to follow the church's teaching, I directly saw the impact. And probably the best example is that now I'm happily married. I went through the annulment process, and so in my second marriage, I practiced theology of the body. I did everything the church's way. And so to me, this is not theoretical, because I did it my way in my first marriage, and I did it the church's way the second marriage. And yes, I'll be the first one to admit church's way is super hard, but it's super worth it. Because if I, going back to the theme of accomplishments, if somebody asks me, hey, Marek, what is your biggest accomplishment in my life? And I say without a doubt, marrying my wife, because it's just amazing. It's not that it's perfect and we don't have our issues, but we, keeping God at the center makes everything worthwhile and more fulfilling, and makes it just a lot more special.
Mhm. Oh, amen. So your book, you wrote a book, it came out in February of last year called
Mhm.
The Love Driven Man.
Yes.
What made you decide to write the book, and why was then the right time?
Yeah, great question. Great question. So, ironically enough, that book was inspired by a talk I gave on the retreat, and the name of the talk was "The 7 Ways Satan Attacks a Man's Heart." And I just kind of like structured this talk, kind of like following my life, but also like identifying the main ways Satan attacks the man's heart. And I've got a lot of positive response for it. And so I decided, and the talk was more about identifying the issues, and it was very helpful because it started dialogue. But what I want to do is I wanted to come up with a resource that once people identify these issues, there's actually things that they can do about them. And so the whole idea behind the book is that there's essentially seven main chapters that go through these different choices, like the choices that we face between love and control, and help men identify how that affects them. And then each chapter has 2 ways a guy, a person can implement, simple things that help you overcome those issues, and over time help you to become less controlling and more loving. And really, the way that happens is by identifying the wounds, identifying how your choice to control the situation, although makes sense logically, but in the long term hurts your ability to love. And just as it protects you from the downside, it prevents the upside of love, because the trust in God is not there. And until we trust God, until we open up to God, it's going to be very hard for us to experience those supernatural graces and the love that we were made for.
So I know you talked about that in chapter one, control
Mm,
versus
mm,
love.
sure.
What are some ways that we as men,
Mm,
because let's be honest, I struggle with that too. I want to be
mm,
in control. I think most guys want to, but
mm.
how can we switch that dynamic to go from control to that being
Mm.
love driven?
Yeah, so first step is read the book, obviously, but
Yes.
the second, no, I'm just joking. But the second, but really the most important thing is to identify the origins. Like really identify where it comes from. Because for example, in my case, I didn't really like realize this till I was in my early 30s. But me realizing how my confidence was affected by my abusive grandfather was a huge step forward, because it's like you can't solve the problem until you know what the problem is. Because, the typical tendency for a guy is, we as guys, we're very solution oriented. We want to get after it, make things happen. But the problem is, typically we attack the symptoms, not the root cause. So for example, I'll give you a perfect example from like, after I divorced, when I was dating before I met my wife, is like, I kept getting into these relationships that were toxic. And at first, they felt awesome. They felt amazing. Said, praise the Lord Jesus, you finally answered my prayers. But then like 3 months into it, it's like the patterns start to emerge, And so initially what I would do is like, hey, what's wrong with this woman? This is not right. I'm making all these changes, but it's not working. And so I was blaming things outside of me. I was blaming the circumstances, not myself. And so like when I finally like looked inside of me and figured out what the root cause is, the root cause being is that in my case, I was codependent. I was attracted to narcissists until I actually looked in, identified what the problem is. Then that finally gave me an idea of what I'm facing and come up with a plan that affects the root cause, affects the disease, not just the symptoms.
Okay. Now, do you have any tips for someone who may be listening to help identify those causes?
Yeah, sure. So the best thing is like I mentioned in my book, there's 7 things to go through that will help you identify it. But if you don't get a chance to read the book, is to really identify where are your biggest hurts, if you will, and then try to find the root cause. So for example, like going that analogy of my relationships, at the time I was doing very well financially, and so to me, like my biggest hurt or disappointment in life, if you will, is the fact that I couldn't find my partner. And so so that was the at the surface, like what the problem is, and that's what I was focusing on doing. And so like kind of going back to the training I got in project management, I don't think really. I'll be curious to know if you remember that from the Army. I don't think I picked it up in the Army. I think it was actually when I did project management. They talk about asking the 5 whys, 5 whys, because it's very easy to just, stop at the, hey, these relationships suck, these women suck. And, that is my lot. And obviously God doesn't love me. It's very easy to say that. But if you ask those 5 whys, well, like, why do these women, are such a disappointing experience? You kind of like start peeling back the onion, and you realize that, hey, there are actually things that I'm responsible, that if I change, if I heal, all these toxic women will lose their appeal to me. And all of a sudden, the women who are good matches will start noticing you and taking you seriously because they see husband material that they're looking for in the relationship.
Now, in your book, you discuss partnering with women versus using them. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for us?
Yeah. So, so obviously, like it's kind of like a simple example in the dating relationships is, for example, sex before marriage. That's like a very good example, because, that's something that I pretty much went through with it was every woman except for my wife. Is I fell into the eros love, the physical love, and at the surface, it's like, well, it's consensual. What's the big deal? But that really make decisions difficult, because once you introduce, hormones, it's very hard to make clear decisions. And so at the surface of it, well, you didn't really use a woman because, she agreed to it. But, as a man, did I lead? Did I set the right example? And so for example, with Jessie, when we started dating, and actually I have to give it credit to her, because that's something that I wanted to discuss, but I was kind of like iffy on, because I never followed through on it. It's like, when I asked her to be my girlfriend, that was the first thing she brought up. It's like, hey, I want to follow through with the theology of the body. And so at that moment we partnered together. Awesome. Because it wasn't easy. It was a team effort. There were times where, I where I almost fell through, and there was times where she got weak. And so like it was a team effort. It definitely wasn't, for the 13 months till we got married. So that's one example. And then like if you're already married, it's another example of that is actually seeking to understand. So obviously in every single relationship there's always conflict. No relationship is conflict free. but it's like what happens when that conflict happens, do you just react to the conflict, or do you try to use the conflict as an opportunity to understand the person better? And I'll give you an example that I mentioned in the book. We have, like, my wife is a huge animal lover. I grew up in Eastern Europe, so not that I'm an animal abuser, but to me, like, animals are like, they're there for a purpose, like for example, like my grandma had a dog because that was to guard the property. My uncle had a dog because he used that dog to hunt. And so we're not used to like putting costumes on dogs for pictures, and that's kind of like where my wife is. And so that was a big adjustment for me. And so, long story short, I remember this one moment where I was on a recliner and I was just like stowing it away, and like Jesse came up to me, so he's like, "Hey, be careful so you don't crash our cat." And I thought, there's no way. I mean, how is that possible? Like to me it felt like an attack, because in my mind I thought there's no way that the cat could be in there. So like I felt personally offended that she doesn't think I'm responsible enough. She thinks that I'm somebody that's going to kill a cat. And it took me, I'll be honest with you, at least a half a day to kind of deal with these thoughts. They were like stirring inside of me. But thank God I learned my lesson that from my previous relationships, that if you don't address things like that, they fester in this relationship. And so I decided to have the conversation with Jesse about it. And that was a beautiful thing, because in that conversation, I found out that the reason why what this happened is that, first of all, me, like, the her criticism, because it didn't feel warranted, brought me back to my childhood home, when my grandfather would just like arbitrarily like criticize me for random things. So that's how I took it. But like and I explained to her like that's how I took it. And then like when I explained to her, she explained to me is that growing up, she didn't get the love that she needed from her parents. And so to her, like, animals were like there to give her the love that she needed growing up. And so that's why, like, right now, these animals are very special for her, because that's what really helped her through those difficult times as a child. And so that's why she's very protective of them. She admitted that, yeah, it probably wouldn't have happened, but me understanding like why the animals are so important to her, made me realize that, hey, it's not personal, it's not about me, it just it's a misunderstanding. And so, like, having that conversation was a classic example of partnering with a person to understand where they're coming from. And because of that, our relationship became deeper. We had a deeper understanding, and we have not had any arguments over the animals ever since. But had we just focus on the surface things, that would have really impacted our relationship. And then who knows, like, if it was my past relationship, would have been a crack that went deeper, brought other things to down, and over time destroyed the relationship.
So talking it out, understanding where each other is coming from, then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, you got it. So instead of the 10-minute explanation, thank you for bottom lining.
Well, no, because honestly, I think it's a hard lesson to learn. It really is. I look back on my life, and my wife will say that I still do that. Like,
Mhm.
and she'll call me out on it, thankfully, because that's how I'm going to learn. And so over the years, that's learned to say, hey, okay, I'm feeling this way because
Yeah.
of this. So how does God fit into how does God fit into all this? I guess let me just leave it there. I know it's a broad question, but
Sure, sure. So God is definitely at the center. I'm sure you've probably seen that one graphic. I'm a very visual person, so like imagine a triangle, and then at the top is God, and then at the bottom is the spouse. And the whole idea behind it is that as both spouses get closer to God by default, they closer to each other. And so to me, the simplest way to answer that question is through prayer. I honestly feel like, hey, like what is the main reason between my marriage now versus the marriage I had before, as well as my older dating relationships? And I can, the biggest difference is prayer. We, ever since I started dating Jesse, we prayed together. We would pray rosary, and even to this day we pray the rosary every night. And to me, that's really the where the God comes in. And to me, that's the clearest way that makes our relationship better. Because I through my coaching certification and working with different people, I definitely have a lot of good tips on how to communicate better, how to improve the relationships. But like, even with the tips, it only goes so far. In other words, like, like the tips make you more productive and efficient, But if your heart is not there, the tips will never overcome the issues of the heart. And so to me, all these things, it's not like I figure out on my own. I feel that they came through me, they were revealed to me over time through prayer. And because of the prayer, I got that humility to admit the beam in my eye rather than speck in somebody else's eye, and address it.
Right. So, what's the ultimate goal of being a love-driven man?
Mhm. Sure. So to me, the ultimate goal of Loving Driven is understanding what the life is about, which is, the subtitle of the book, what matters eternally.
Hmm.
Because, in our life, it's very easy to get caught up in day to day, the kind of develop that tunnel vision, and it's super hard. And, I'm still guilty of it. When you look at Facebook, you see somebody doing better, or for example, like in ministry, you feel like this is the right approach, but you see somebody else doing a different approach and actually works, and you don't feel it's the right way. So it's very tempting to switch over.
Yeah.
Or who knows, maybe judge them, and maybe that person's doing all the right things, but it's easier to judge the person rather than admit that you're not doing as well for whatever the reasons are. And so it's really understanding like what this life is about. And so to me, like, once you understand that this life is about the eternal life, and you always keep it at the forefront, then it's a lot easier to make the right choices. In other words, if you if you look at your salary as something that that is only important on this earth, that's obviously, that will make certain choices. But if you think about like what matters eternally, like what things that you do will matter the most when your life is over, whenever that may be, then it becomes about, hey, if I meet my maker today, or a year from now, or 20 years from now, how will I feel about this choice? And when you put in that perspective, it makes it a lot easier to make the right decision. Obviously, it's still hard to implement the decision, but
Right.
to me, it's kind of like a muscle. The more you use it, the easier it becomes. It never, if you look at these athletes, these Olympic athletes, none of them think it's easy, but because they've been doing it for so long, and they're in that habit, it becomes easier. And to them, the journey becomes their reward. And that's kind of like another thing that's very that's a big transition, is moving not necessarily from the result but the process. Are you happy with the process? Because if you're happy with the process, the results will come. And even if some of those results will not come in this life, they will definitely come in the life to follows.
Okay. So, what has been the response that you've received from the book? Any feedback?
So yeah, so here's the funny thing, like the book did very well. When I released it right before COVID, and it got the #1 new release.
Awesome.
But then COVID happened, and I don't have the capacity to talk about the book outside of here, the Houston area. And so ever since, I've been invited to some conferences, the virtual Catholic conferences, and obviously like podcasts such as yours. Tomorrow I'll be doing the Catholic Gentleman podcast. And so it's been a blessing. It's been a very humbling experience. And and you learn. It's one of those things that you put your best foot forward, and to me, the thing that makes this experience the most worthwhile is like how people perceive it. Like, because you write it one way, and then the person perceives it the other way, and then so it's really great to see how it impacts people for the positive. But it's a good experience to help me figure out what those gaps are for the next book, and where the need is. Because I don't want to just write a book to write a book. I want to write a book that addresses a gap that hasn't been addressed yet.
Okay. So where can our listeners check out the book? Where can they get it?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay. So you can check it out Amazon, Kindle, paperback, and also I have an Audible version too. It's kind of a cool story.
Oh, cool.
It's not me narrating it, thank God, but it's I actually found this veteran too, great voice. He's kind of got that Morgan Freeman voice, and so it's if you it's like me, like I'm more of a visual person, so I thought, especially for like a book that makes you think. People want to actually have a physical book, because there's like in a physical book, there's a place to take notes. I thought that would be the primary means, but what I found is a good number of folks who prefer listening. And also there's a good number of folks who are quite busy. And so for them, it's helpful to listen to it as they commute to work,
Right.
or they go for a walk, or they do some other task. And so it's also available on Audible as well. And that's also was something that, when I introduced it, was the #1 release. So that was a huge blessing.
Right. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You do a coaching business as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So where can our listeners get a hold of you if they're interested in maybe doing that with you?
Yeah, sure. So please go to my website. It's basically my first name, last name.com. So just marekrudak.com. What I focus in my coaching, kind of like, and you can relate, William, it's, in the ministry space, it's not easy to, how can I say, make a living out of it. So
right.
kind of like, going to my analogy of St. Paul, not that I'm comparing myself to St. Paul, but, St. Paul did tent making to support his life. And so like, kind of like my day job, if you will, is executive coaching. And so what I do is I help employees get their dream promotions, whether that's executives or starting employees. And so I really enjoy that. And so if you go to my website, that'll be the language that you'll see in there is career oriented. But having said that, if you need some help with relationships or some help with your career or leadership skills, go right on there. You can book a quick 15-minute call. I'll definitely give you value. And if it makes sense, then I'll invite you to work with me and make sure that the results that you get is what you want. But more importantly, it's aligned with God's will for your life, because that's what I've noticed is really makes the big difference. It's not only having the results, but making sure that they align with the God's purpose for you. Because when you combine those two, that's what really makes the most fulfilling of life, of results and relationships.
Right. Okay. So again, the book is The Love-Driven Man. I highly recommend it. Check it out on Amazon. It's a great read. You will learn a lot from it. And Marek, I thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you for invitation. And I want to applaud your rolling R's. They're fantastic.
Oh, thank you. It's been a long time since I've used one. All right. God bless.